Welcome back to the Daily Drum on WHUR and Sirius XM Channel 141. I'm Harold Fisher. Are you in the market for a car? We all know they are not cheap these days. New or used, you have down payments, interest rates, monthly payments, maintenance, and insurance to consider. And of course, in the unfortunate circumstance that you get behind on a payment and your car gets repossessed, what do you do when that happens? Well, we're talking about your money tonight with America's Wealth Coach, Deborah Owens, founder and president of Wealthy You. Hey, Deb, how are you? Good to see you again.
Oh, it's always a pleasure, Harold.
So, we're not going to talk about the Rolls Royce that you have.
Okay.
Um,
Oh, you got jokes as usual.
I always do. I always do. But all jokes aside, the reality is that a lot of people need cars to get back and forth. If they prefer not to take public transportation, they need a car or some kind of vehicle to get back and forth to work, to run errands, groceries, and the like. Before we even get into some of the realities of getting a new car or a used car, kind of give me your perspective on the landscape of where we are now in 2024. We know how things were during the pandemic. It was crazy. But have things changed?
Yes, but you know what? It is interesting. The number of, I don't know about you, but during the pandemic, you saw all of these like very people driving all of these very expensive trucks, all of these very expensive SUVs. And I really feel like a lot of that was the stimulus and also uh not like a $1,200 stimulus check is gonna buy you a car, but I also know that some of the incentives during that time allowed small business owners to write off any car over a certain size and weight class. And so I feel like that's why we saw it seemed like everybody had a brand new car. But what was really difficult is that for those who were looking for used cars or SUVs, it was very difficult to find a used car during the pandemic. And not only was it supply, but it was cost, right? So, the difference between a used car and a new car, there wasn't much daylight. What has happened though, is simply the cost of owning a car has almost doubled within the last decade, right? So, 10 years ago, average cost of a car maybe 15 to 20K. Now it's upwards of 40K.
Yeah.
And if you're in a two-family household and you've got two car notes, that's probably the second highest expense that you have other than your mortgage, right? And in some cases above that. I was just reading some stats, and the average auto car payment is $700,
Mm-hmm.
right? And that's average, right? So that's median. So I know of people who have $1,000 car notes. That is not unusual. And for the average person, let's say middle class household, maybe making even 80 to $100,000. That's a lot of money. And we haven't even started the biggest expense though with car ownership is insurance, right? So depending upon where you live, it's not unusual for your insurance payment to be $400 or $500 a month, another car payment. So it really has put a strain on people's budgets. And I don't care if you need a job. If you need a job, you have to have transportation.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And particularly if there is an extended commute. It's one thing if you work in your community at a local business, but if you need to commute from the suburbs into the city or vice versa, from the city out to the suburbs, you want to be able to move when you need to move and how you need to move, and that can be difficult. So if you're sitting at home and you're saying, okay, I've decided that I need to buy a car, what's the first thing that you should start to think about even before you start asking the kind of car, the brand, or the size? How should you begin to think about these things in your head?
Well, first off, it used to be budget, right? Like, so how much do you want to spend? How much can you afford? Is probably where you want to start. But I would say that you need to go and look at the lay of the land. And I think people are going to be shocked when they start shopping for cars and they see the cost of them, right?
Mhm.
So the beauty though is you have so many other opportunities that you didn't have in the past, because you can go on sites like CarMax. You can go, some people don't know, but Costco actually has relationships with auto dealerships. So you can, the first thing is do your research, right? That's the first thing. And then the second thing is, I think you also need to consider, do you really need to buy a new car? Okay, because we know that the minute you buy a car, it's going to depreciate as soon as you drive it off the lot. So, as much as we can get, I think we can romanticize things. And in fact, I have a funny story of a member in the Wealthy You community. She's, retired. She feels like she should reward herself. She felt like she reward herself. So she had told the dealer, put that Cadillac over for me, right?
Not the Cadillac.
Yeah, the Cadillac, right? The Cadillac. And so, she never had a Cadillac and she was going to buy her a luxury car. Well, part of it is being in our community. You really do have a mindset shift. You're like, wait a minute, that if I make that car is not going to make me any money, right? Like if I go buy that car, it's not going to increase my net worth. But funny story.
But she
So
may look cute in it though.
yeah, well, that was certainly what she was thinking. But, after a week or so, she started, going through her mind, and why would I spend this kind of money on this car? I have and she needed to replace her car because she had her existing car for over 14 years. It had, she got up to a couple of 100,000 miles. So this is a frugal person. Well, I guess the salesperson called her to put some pressure on her, and he was like, "Oh, it's gone." And she was like, that was the Lord answering, because I didn't need that anyway. And what she ended up buying was a car that was 5 years, right? Low mileage of the same car that she had driven. And so I really feel, I tell you that story to say that, what we think we want financially, it may not be what we need. And so we can get, and that's why repossessions that are at their highest right now. Repossessions are up 23%. Part of that is a function of interest rates going up. And so, how much you pay for financing that car certainly is has impact. And so the other thing I think people need to do is to research. The good news is, unlike during the pandemic, used cars are now, the prices have come down, right? And there's more supply. So I would say to anyone, start there. But I would say do your homework too. What are the cars that hold their value and don't have a lot of maintenance? Because that's the other issue. I was looking at cars like what's the part, Range Rovers. They have
Yes.
the worst maintenance history, right, in terms of cost. Mercedes as well. I hate to break that to you, right? But cars like Toyotas, Hondas, Lexus, they maintain their value. So if I were someone out looking, I wouldn't only look at the price. I look at how that car's maintenance record is, how much it's going to cost me to maintain it, and also to find a car. You could find a 3 or 4 year old car that, because of COVID, might only have 13 or 14,000 miles on it, because people are working from home, right?
Mhm.
So they don't have all that mileage. So that's another benefit, wear and tear. So, just in summary, go out here, go online, do your homework. I think after you do your homework and narrow it down, go test drive some cars. You can go to a CarMax that has a lot of different cars. And what I didn't mention, though, is really go and see if you're with a credit union, really explore financing. Right now, you're not going to go in there and tell them you got your own financing when you get to the lot, right? But once you decide on that car, if you have already negotiated financing with a credit union, which are much more competitive in terms of rates, that is the approach I would use if I were someone looking to buy a car and I didn't want to break the bank.
Yeah. So I'm going to go back to something that you were saying before we even get into the financing, but you were talking about maintenance. A lot of cars, new or used, they will sell maintenance packages. That is a relatively new thing.
Ooh, and they try to wear you out selling them too.
But how do you determine whether or not the maintenance package is good for you? Because I would imagine it would depend on what your situation happens to be. I'll share this with you before we go into the break. So the car that I have is a Toyota. I bought it. It's a 2013. I bought it in 2015 after my Honda died with more than 300,000 miles on it. When I bought the used Toyota, the dealership sold me for $900 a oil change for life. So the oil changes on this Toyota are $75. Well, my commute is 100 miles a day. In doing that commute, unlike most people who may have 2 or 3 oil changes a year, I had 5 oil changes a year. That $900 was spent in 2 years. I still have that car.
Yeah, so it depends, right? So whenever anyone asks me advice, especially when it has to do with financing or numbers, crunch the numbers. I just feel like I'm gonna buy a brand new car and you're gonna sell me a maintenance package. Well, what are you saying to me? Number one, right? But let's say you buy a used car. And I would say for luxury cars, I mean, if you look at maintenance, the average cost of going in typically every 3 months could hit you up for $1,000, right?
Mhm.
So what you want to look at, okay, is what if I buy this package versus, incur these costs myself? What is the net result? Right. And most of the dealers, they'll tell you what your maintenance is going to be. That's number one. Number
Hold
two.
on for 1 second, Deb.
Okay.
Hold on, because I want to get to the number 2 and
Okay.
the rest of it. But I
Yeah.
need to take a break. Now, don't
Okay.
forget,
Sounds great.
you need to hear this. You can, that is, hear this and every edition of the Daily Drum Insight segment via podcast on WHUR.com. The original Quiet Storm with John Mons is next. That's on WHUR. I'm Harold Fisher. This conversation about your money and buying a car, new or used, continues on Sirius XM channel 141 in just a few seconds. Welcome back to the Daily Drum on Sirius XM channel 141. I'm Harold Fisher. We continue our conversation about your money. Buying a car, new or used, can you afford it? My guest is America's wealth coach, Deborah Owens, founder and president of Wealthy You. Before the break, Deb, you were talking about some of the maintenance packages when you were buying a car. And the thing that I was saying before is the $900 that I spent back in 2015 for that forever oil change, that $900 was basically spent in 2 years. I
Yeah.
still have that car and I'm still going and getting that forever oil change, and I don't have to put anything out.
And every time you roll into that dealership, they're mad. Well, you got a great return on investment, right? Because
Yeah.
the other thing you need to know about car ownerships is the margins on the actual car sales, right, that dealers are making is not that great, right? Where they make their money on is service and maintenance, right? So that's why they're selling you those maintenance cars. And that's why I want to go back to one of the most important things I think people need to look at, and that is what is the maintenance cost of owning some of these cars, right? And for many, some of the whether it's a Mercedes, Audi, those sorts of thing, oftentimes you have to have, in order to maintain, especially if it's new, in order to maintain its warranty, you have to have that service done at those dealerships, right? So
Right.
cost of maintenance. And so, what we have found, my husband and I, you're Honda, I'm Toyota and Lexus. What we have found, oil change, you don't have to have premium gas. You take it to a person that knows how to, work on those types of cars. That the difference in cost of maintaining a car is huge. And so for those people who are looking at buying a new car, really look at some of the cars and their maintenance records so that you can look at the overall cost, not just the cost of the car.
Mm-hmm. Let's talk a little bit about financing. We spoke about that briefly earlier. First and foremost, for the sake of this conversation, let us assume that you have good credit, not an excellent credit, but not bad credit, where when you apply for credit that you're sweating bullets. I don't know, what would you consider good? 720, 725?
Anything over 700 is good.
Okay, so
right?
let us
And,
assume.
you can go really on experience, or you can go to freecreditreport.com and you can get your experience, your TransUnion, your core every quarter. It's very now. If you got a credit card, they'll basically tell you what your experience score is. So that's good. But I caution you, right? I caution folks to be too wedded to those credit scores, because the bottom line is you could have an 800, and depending upon what the rates of the financing company are, you can end up with a higher rate.
Really?
Yeah. So that's the other thing I want people to understand, is that that's the other way that, now I'm not hating on the dealerships, right? But I just want people to know how they make their money. And the other part, so is they don't make their money on the car, they make their money on the maintenance and the financing, right? And oftentimes what they'll do is they say, hey, if you take this rate today, you can get this, but if you leave here, I'm not sure you're going to get this rate tomorrow. So the other thing that I want people to do, people are so afraid of going out and having someone pull their credit. It doesn't have to be a hard pull, right? But you need to be looking at credit. If you don't belong to a credit union, you need to, but you need to do your research, right? So what are car loans right now? You can go to a site like bankrate.com. And you can look at or Nerd Wallet is one of my other favorites, and you can see what the average car is based on your credit score. But I think the best thing that anyone who is in the market for a car can do is first you got to identify what car you want, right? And then you're going to call up your credit union or go to your credit union or apply online. And you're going to say, hey, I want to buy this used car. And that's the other great thing, Harold. It used to be a time where you had to buy a new car to get a great rate, right? Now the car can be, 4 years or younger, right? For you to get a great rate. You can lock in that rate. In some cases, when I bought my last car, my credit union said, here, Deb, Miss Owens, here's the check. How much did you say it's going to be? They gave me a check. I walked into the dealer and, I let them give me the old rigmarole. And I said, yeah, I like that price. Boom, boom, boom. And they said, okay, financing. And then I said, oops, I got my.
I have cash.
Yeah.
Essentially.
I have, essentially. And, they'll tell you it may not be the exact amount, but, they'll tell you to take that and then they just finance it. I just want people to know is that you need to be in the driver's seat, literally,
so to speak. Yeah.
Right? Before you make a purchase. And so that way you can go in, you're confident, you know how much you're going to spend. You already know what the interest rate is. I would also, the other thing I would do though, is because depending upon where you live and what kind of car you purchase, you also want to call the insurance company to say, hey, give me a quote, right? And so it's not like you're beholden to even one insurance company. You would be amazed. We did this challenge. And one of the first things I asked people, when's the last time you got an insurance quote from your agent? And they're like, oh, I haven't done that in years. And, so they had savings of thousands of dollars or more simply because they got their car quoted. They bundled their home and auto. Those are just the sort of things that I think people oftentimes don't think of, but they need to, because it all kind of weaves together in terms of car ownership.
One of the things that I've heard, and I hope you have some information about this, when you go back to talking about credit scores and insurance, does your credit score matter?
Absolutely does.
So how does that work exactly? Let us say your credit score was in the 710s years ago, but you've been doing your wealthy you work and
it's now 800.
Yeah,
so,
let us say 750 or what have you.
What's so funny is you're gonna laugh, but I worked for one of the largest insurance companies for years, and so I kind of know this like the back of my hand, right? When you go to get a quote, they are going to pull your credit score, and so I just want folks to know that you have a risk profile, right? So insurance companies are managing risk. And so your credit score basically is telling them how you manage your money, right? So the lower your score, the higher your risk. And so, yes, you need to be, there's been a lot of legislation around that not being fair, saying that it hurts people who, may have like high medical bills, may have, maybe went through a bout of unemployment. And that is true. But the reality is they do take your credit score into account, and they are going to pull your current credit score. And that's you just brought up another reason, right? To have a requote. Okay. When you started with someone, with the company, your credit score may not have been as high as it is right now. So and you need to shop around. Right? You need to shop around. So it's not just getting a quote from your existing insurer. It is looking at other companies. So for example, what many people don't know is that there are independent companies, and there are companies like Allstate and State Farm. And what those independent companies are, Progressive being one of them, right, is they are carriers for a host of different companies. And so when they shop for you, they're going to shop for you for several companies and see what those best rates are. So, that's the other advice I would give, is that, I'm from Detroit. And when I heard some of the numbers, and I'm sure it's the same in Baltimore, that, my family and friends were paying, I couldn't believe it. It literally was like another car note, $600 a
Yeah.
month.
Yeah. And one of the things that I don't think a lot of people really understand is something that I learned several years ago, is that when I first moved back to the East Coast from the Midwest, and I was living out in the county, that my insurance rates were lower in the suburbs than they were in the city. And that sometimes, even if it's only a few dollars, the insurance rate for your vehicle can be less if it is not parked on the street, but there is a
Yeah,
driveway, or if it's
you have
garage.
a garage, right? Yeah, because if you have a garage, you're reducing the risk of your car being stolen. I was just thinking how impactful that is for many people, right? Depending upon where they live and the cost of insurance. So you are dead on there, dead on point. And, one of the other things I wanted to talk about, though, we've been talking about buying,
Mm-hmm.
right? What about leasing?
Ah.
Okay. So I think we need to cover that, because the difference between, if you look at the average auto purchase payment is about $700. The
Mm-hmm.
average lease payment is $450, right? So that's considerably less. And you're wondering, well, wait a minute, why wouldn't everybody lease? Well, because at the end of the lease, you gotta, you never own the car. But I would say there are some great advantages to leasing, but you got to make sure that the most important thing on leasing a car is how much mileage are you going to put on that car.
Yeah, I was going to. So, for somebody who's considering leasing, how do they determine that?
Yeah, well, like when you lease a car, they're going to tell you this is the monthly payment, and if you bring it back in this state, and if you don't go, you go over, I think it's like 13. I'm sure it varies, but $13,000 or $14,000, 13 or 14,000 miles a year, you're going to be fine, right? Mm-hmm. And so in that case, what you need to, it may be that, like you, and like many of us, we're working from home, right? So we're not putting as many miles on a car, but we need a car.
Yeah.
And so, again, you got to apply for it. There's no, going to the credit union and coming up with any deals there. Those leases are typically directly from the dealer. And they're going to give you whatever the terms are. And that's really what you have to decide. The downside is, you do a 2-year lease, a 3-year lease. After that lease is up, you're back at ground zero. But then count the cost. I mean, I would say a lease is for someone who likes to have a new car, right? Likes to have the latest model, and is okay with the fact that every year they're going to have to start back up and pay
Or
it.
however long the lease is.
Yeah, because I mean, it's not like you're going to go in like you bought a car and you're going to get a trade-in value. No, that's not how the lease is up. You go in. Now, in some cases, they will make you an offer, like if you want to buy the car, mm-hmm. right, upon the lease, and they'll give you some kind of deal there. But again, I think for anybody who's considering a lease, how much miles are you going to put on it, right? Wear and tear as well, because any nicks and scratches or whatever, when you return that, they're gonna, and you probably had to put on a deposit. And that deposit really is so that if you bring that car back and it's not in pristine condition, then just know they're going to take some, you're going to take some, they're make sure that they get that cost, that you
Like
get the
renting an apartment, you've got your down payment, and if
That's a
you
great
have
way to look at it.
a hole in the wall, well, then if your down payment on your apartment is $1,500, they're going to take $500 to repair the hole in the wall, or what have you. That's
Yeah, I wasn't always an advocate of leases, because of the fact that you don't own the car. But I do think that now that car prices have gotten so high, that it is a more affordable option if people can stay within the parameters of maintenance and mileage more than anything, and not put too much wear and tear on the car. If they can do that, then the lease is not a bad option, because you're not going to pay as much as you would with a car note.
Yeah. So now let's get to the downside of, and this goes back to the issue of your budget, your own finances, the stuff happens kind of situation. Because what I've seen a lot of it in social media. Some of it is funny, but some of it not so much.
No, when you are
You see these tow trucks, these expert repossessing tow trucks. Back in the
they
day,
got whole shows dedicated to
yeah, they
that.
have whole shows,
Where,
dedicated to that.
where they, I saw a show where the woman came to get the person's car, and the other woman comes out, they get into a kerfuffle, and next thing I know, she's on a 2-story garage, flips the person that was taking the car off of the I was like, you know what? No car is worth that. But that is the downside. I guess what you're
Yeah,
saying is buying too much car.
yeah. If you certainly, if you can't afford it, and the tow trucks, they're looking for you. If your car is in a position where it's going to be repossessed, and we've all heard stories about people trying to hide their cars, but they know that if your car is not at your house, they're scoping you out. If you've moved your car to your grandma's house, or to your brother's garage, or you're parking they may not get you today, but they're going to get you.
Well, yeah. And so I would say, here's all I'm going to say, that how do they call it? A pound of prevention is worth more than, I forget what the term is.
Yes.
Right. You know what
an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure.
Yes. Okay. And so, like, what I want to tell people is, if you are in a financial bind, you need to call these creditors, right? Like, if you're in a financial bind, you need to call these creditors and try to negotiate, right? But in the case of a car, I would say you're better off, like, you get 2 months behind, just calling them and saying, listen, so that money isn't racking up. You're better off just taking that car in, because what it will do to your credit score, right? Like a repossession, right, is probably just, and I don't claim to be an expert in credit, but a repossession, I'm sure, and as it's looked at on your credit record, is just as bad as a foreclosure. You know what I mean? And so the point, when I say an ounce of prevention, right, is better than a pound of cure. People, these creditors, they have it. So here's what I want folks to know. is that the MasterCards of the world, all of these financing companies, they have nonprofits whose role it is for when you get out in trouble is for you to be able to go to them and that nonprofit be able to negotiate different things with your creditors, right? Like that's the other side of these companies providing financing is that they do have an obligation to their customers, right? And Lord knows, we've been through, I'm sure you've been through some ups and downs financially. There are seasons in life, right?
Yes, indeed.
And so what I would say to anyone who is in a position, who's listening to us right now, who's maybe afraid that somebody's going to go take, they're in like a repossession kind of state, right? Call folks, tell them the situation. You're better off turning the car in and it not being repossessed and you coming up with some kind of way to pay what's in arrears than to have that show up on your credit record. I don't care because I know if your car is in issues, then your other credit stuff is an issue, right? So go find they have like in every state, there is a nonprofit credit counselor. And it is their job for when people, and they're being funded by, the MasterCards and Visas of the world, right? And it is their job to help you to look at your budget, negotiate with creditors, and see if you can't get a fresh start. That's all I want to say is that, it's not about judgment. Yeah, it felt good buying that SUV and riding around in it. But hey, things happen and it's better to get in front of it and ask for help, right? Than it is to just, what happens is it always gets worse, right? Inaction, it always gets worse. It never gets better.
Definitely get in front of it.
That's with your health. That's with your money, anything. It never gets better. It always gets worse.
So if your car is repossessed, what happens to it once
now
it's
that I'm not going to say that I'm not going to say that I know, but I'm sure that you go into these what are auctions, right? I'm sure what happens is the dealership knows they're not going to get all that money. I'm not sure if they put those back on the lot. I think they sell them at auction. That's why you see, you can go to these different car auctions. I think that's where eventually those cars go. But at the end of the day, the company wants to get what they can, because if you ain't paying them nothing, it may not be, if you're not paying them nothing, they're better off in getting their car back and getting what they can out of it.
So if it's repossessed, is it possible, let's say it's repossessed today and you get a raise at work or they give you the lump sum, or a leprechaun with a pot of gold drops some coins on your front porch and you're able to pay? Is it possible to get your car back?
Well, I don't think you're going to get your car back, because now you're just in arrears, right? Like they gave you that's what I mean. An ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure. If you could have got in front of that and maybe negotiated it, you may have had a chance of, maybe negotiating payments, extending the term of the loan or something like that. That's really what I want to encourage people to do. Like, don't wait. Like, when you can't make that first payment, that then trying to come up with two payments is going to be even harder. So pick up the phone. Yes, I know there's a lot of shame and whatever around it, but if you can get in front of things, it's much better. After the fact, the tow truck has taken your car, you are a terrible risk. That's all I want to say. Like, I don't care if you get a lump sum of money. How the any finance company looks at you is you signed a contract. Are you going to honor this contract?
Yeah.
When you don't honor that contract, it puts a blemish on your record. And let me tell you, financial ignorance is expensive. Right?
What do you mean by that?
I mean that the less knowledge you have about how the financial system works, the more it's going to cost you. Right? So, people file bankruptcy every day. You know what I'm saying? Like, I think, people negotiate debt every day. Very wealthy people negotiate debt every day. Very wealthy people, they get things get ahead of themselves. They don't have as much income coming in. Their business isn't working. They negotiate every day. I'm just saying, for the little person, that you have power too, but you have to understand how this system works, and you have to take ownership of your finances. And, you can't be ashamed. Like, everybody falls on difficult times, right? Things don't always work out the way that we should. And what is critical, though, is that we communicate and to convey to people that we need help. This is all I want to end with this, Harold, is that you can measure a person's success by their ability to ask for help. Now, what do I mean by that? Like, a lot of people are suffering in silence.
Yeah.
They are so afraid to let anybody know that things are difficult, right? So what happens is we don't communicate. And so guess what? Doesn't get better. It gets worse. Okay. Yeah. So there are all kinds of organizations that are here, credit counseling that know how the system works and that can assist you. I think oftentimes we feel like, oh, well, we don't know what to do. We don't want to tell people we don't. Well, they're experts in that, right? So go find yourself an expert and someone who can help you out of your situation. That's what I want folks to really take away from this.
Deborah, I've got to wrap things up as always. How can people find out about Wealthy You?
Yes, well, Wealthy You is a community, and we talk about, we're on a mission to help 1 million folks, 1 million first generation investors really build wealth, right? And so being a first generation investor is different because you didn't learn it anywhere, right? So you got to learn it. So every day we're talking about how you can make more money, how you can get a better job. So they can just go to WealthyU.com and join our community. WealthyU.com.
Wealthy You with the letter U.
That's WEALTHYU.com. And Wealthy You, we say the conversation is different.
There we go. And on that car note, Deb, I'm sure I'll see you gangster leaning at some point with a car that you've had for a while. Yes, I'm telling my age for anybody who knows about the gangster lean. A Cadillac from Detroit. I always gotta leave you laughing.
Oh, that tickled me.
There you go. Deborah Owens, thank you so much. Always great talking to you, sis. We'll be in touch.
You as well.
That is the Daily Drum for this Wednesday, July 24th. I'm Harold Fisher.